Hello and welcome to another weekly talking tactics breakdown disaster. Unfortunately, with my good friend Dharnish Iqbal, we're going to obviously we did one last week talking about the first couple of weeks, the things that were good, the things we were concerned about, whether we could keep this going, and then we played Liverpool at the weekend, and of course, once we played a good team, a very good team. I think we have a new way of looking at United once again, with a little bit of exhaustion, a little bit of frustration, and we want to talk through that and really what are United trying to do and what is so, I guess, because it's not what's so bad about it, but why it's so easy to beat for teams who are well structured, who are competently set up, and who have the kind of physical, energetic, especially in the midfield, players like Liverpool do have. And we're going to do it with pictures this time as well once we get into it. So you can see from Dharnish's great thread on Twitter with lots of images and things that should help, with showing. So how was the game for you? Are you I think you're as angry, as frustrated as me, as the rest of us for sure, right?
I haven't calmed down yet. What day are we? What is it? Wednesday? I haven't calmed down
Yeah,
yet.
it's been 3 days. I
Um,
know.
this is also I said it the last time. I was like, you better not lose. It's an international break, and now you got to deal with 2 weeks of conjecture and speculation.
Yes.
There'll probably be a scandal at some point because there always is with Man United. This isn't headline news. This is no exclusive. Don't take this to heart, but we've got 2 weeks now of just pouring over this Liverpool game and pouring over getting banged out by Liverpool again at Old Trafford. I turned to my brother, who's unfortunately a Liverpool fan, a full time, and he was beaming. I was like, I'm tired of just getting banged out by Liverpool constantly at Old Trafford. I was like, I'm scared every time they got through. It's not. It feels like deja vu, but it's just yeah. We'll get into it, but it's
Frustration, huh?
we've been banged out too many times by Liverpool at Old Trafford. It could have been, by the way,
Yeah.
3-0 flat us in
Hmm.
some ways.
Hmm. Yeah, I know we missed a few chances, but at the same time, I think what we all kind of saw when you watch the game is that in some ways similar to the FA Cup, where Liverpool kind of took their foot off the gas.
Yeah.
But they didn't take their chances. They had a lot more chances in that game, right? That FA Cup game that we won. They could have scored many more goals and put it out of reach, but they didn't. They didn't take their chances. In this game, they did. They scored. I think it definitely could have been a lot worse. And I wouldn't have been surprised if it was worse and if it got worse. We had a few chances, but I think again, even that kind of flatters the situation because the game was a bit out
Absolutely.
of reach by that point in
Absolutely.
time. So before we get into the pictures, let me ask you a question. Did we do the same thing we did the first few games? In many ways, was it mostly the
No,
same? No.
the structure was the same. The structure was
Yeah.
mainly the same. Casemiro and Mainu protect the two central midfielders, get up close to them. One of Xerxes or Bruno press. The other one drops in a little bit. The wingers have to go to the fullbacks. Um, the structure was largely the same. And I want to make this very pertinently clear.
Mm.
The structure was exploitable, and Liverpool are a very good team. They know what they're doing. There's a very smart teams know even if the structure out of possession against another team is what it is, they're still going to find ways of finding
Right.
space. Man City
Yep.
are very good at this. I labeled the Man City game against us at Old Trafford last season because they're very intelligent teams. Will pull your out of possession structure around.
Mm-hmm.
They won't give anything the chance. This is exactly what Liverpool did. But another thing that was very clear to me was just the absolute lack of intensity from Man
Mm-hmm.
United. It's an absolute lack of pressing. We'll get into it later with the pictures, but there's certain times where I thought in the rewatch, I was like, that structure is kind of all right. It's not horrible. They're where they should be, but the lack of intensity from Xerxes, from Casemiro and Mainu and Bruno as well meant that they just got through easily. There was one shot, I think, within the first 5 minutes. Xerxes was like close to Gravenberg, so was Mainu. Bruno's pressing the centre backs. Casemiro is where he should be, where he's next to McAllister, and you're like, okay, fine. And Van Dijk slices a pass through 5 players. Gravenberg sort of lets the ball run through him, takes it on his right foot, and moves forward. Liverpool just kept finding gaps in between our out of possession structure. And the 4-2 press that we had, so with Maino, Casemiro, and the 2 wingers, Rashford and Garnacho, and Xerxes and Bruno Fernandes, they kept finding gaps in the middle. Even if the structure was where they should be, it wasn't tight enough, or Szoboszlai would roam around wherever, which meant that Maino, where he was supposed to be tracking McAllister, and he kept just looking behind him. There's a couple of frames that I have where he's 10 yards further from Szoboszlai this way, and 10 yards close to McAllister this way, because he's not sure whether he needs to sweep up with where McAllister is because he's going to get the ball, or he needs to go back this way because Szoboszlai just kept roaming to the left and the right. It wasn't, the structure was okay. The intensity was severely lacking. And it's like when I messaged John McKenzie about it, and John McKenzie literally just said 3 words to me. He said, Mason Mount, innit? I was like, yep, absolutely. No Mason Mount, the press was lacking. There was still some opportunities where they did turn over the ball, and that's gonna happen. That's gonna happen if you go for a high press, because not every, footballers, they practice day in, day out for hours on end, doing the simplest of stuff, passing from A to B. Yep. In a game, they're still gonna mess it up, so you're still gonna cause a turnover. But it didn't matter because the in possession stuff absolutely stank as well. All across the board, the performance stank. In possession, it absolutely stank as well. We'll get on to that later, but every moment in attack that United created stank too, and you can't do that in a Man United Liverpool game.
Yeah. Well, I agreed, understood, and I guess part of the concerns that, of course, a lot of us had, which is that, and I think we mentioned this in a little podcast in one of a few videos before, and as tends to happen, I'll bring up Fred. Especially when we get into how Ugarte will get into this team as well and what he will bring, which are positives. But, a long time ago, I said about Mason Mount when we were first signing him that in some ways we're looking for a better Fred. Because what Fred brought to the table was a player who, with his energy and his intensity, would cover a lot of ground, make up a lot of distances, and would fix a lot of the holes that can be created simply by not being intense enough and not being quick enough. Because of course, you have to have a lot of intensity out of possession. In possession, teams like City, Arsenal tend to be at times slow, almost lackadaisical because they're very calm. But out of possession, when the moment is right, when they are pressing, the intensity is high. And that is something lacking from United. And whether it's, whatever the reason may be, it's there. And, of course, the other factor with Mason Mount is you simply, in some respect, you're adding another midfielder, and he was playing with Bruno, because you end up with 4 midfielders, and Mason Mount probably dropped in to cover in the midfield a bit more than you would have in the current system, where Bruno tends to run into the back line no matter where he's positioned. He tends to run and press the keeper, press the center backs, and so you end up vacating the midfield just a little bit more out of possession, no matter what, when you have Bruno versus Mason Mount as well. Yeah. But I guess that intensity, it's such a tough problem to solve, because in week 1, I thought Kobbie Mainoo and Casemiro were very intense in their pressing, very energetic.
But that also might have to do with the fact that you're not playing Andres Pereira anymore. You're not playing Emil Smith-Rowe anymore. You're not playing Lukic anymore. You're playing Gravenberg. You're playing McAllister. You're playing Szoboszlai. You're playing Salah. That might be a big reason why these players are good under pressure.
Correct. And there's a thing you mentioned where you said that there was a lot of moments where they weren't sure. And one of my views on like intensity and effort, things like that, a lot of times people will put it down to like things that I don't agree with, like the player doesn't care, the player isn't trying, the player isn't this, the player isn't that. But more often than not, what I find is that it's a confidence issue. When someone knows exactly what to do without question, then they can go 100% on it. When
Yeah.
someone has a confusion, so like when you say Kobe Mainoo's here and he's like, do I press McAllister and get tight to him? Or do I need to drop back to cover Szoboszlai or Gravenberch, who's moving around? And then where's Casemiro? Oh, shoot, Casemiro's getting dragged this way. The confusion leads to a lack of intensity as well when someone is not sure. Because if you're sure, it's like, it's easy. It's something one can do in life at any point in time. If you don't know what you're doing, it's hard to go somewhere with any kind of direction and purpose, right? And to really go all in on something. When you don't know, you're sitting there like, well, I don't know what to do, you know?
It
But
was a bit of both. It was like
yes,
when they were in the right places, there wasn't enough intensity, and at other times when they did exploit the structure, Liverpool, that's what caused the confusion.
right.
We can go through
Yeah, let's look at our
the
first
events
one
now.
here now. Yeah.
So what's happening here is Xerxes has gone to press the centre backs. By the way, I don't know if people know this, but if you rewatch the games, it's Bruno who tells Xerxes to press these centre backs. Now this is good or bad. I would rather Xerxes just hang back and make it a little bit more compact in the middle. But when Van Dijk passes to Szoboszlai here, it drags Man United to one side. It drags Garnacho to one side. Garnacho is normally going to be pressing Robertson.
Yeah.
Or he's in the
They're
middle.
trying to trap Szoboszlai here, right? By
Yeah.
Garnacho and Casemiro going on either side. They're trying to trap him, right? Essentially.
Yeah. Garnacho, before this pass was played, was in between where Szoboszlai and Van Dijk was. He wasn't very good out of possession. He wasn't blocking the passing lane off. But as the ball comes into Szoboszlai, Casemiro has to then come across. Garnacho has to come across. Now you see in the middle, what's happening is Mainu is far away from McAllister. The ball is played into McAllister, and then the next shot is McAllister plays it down the line to Diaz, and Liverpool have progressed from defence to attack and dragged Man United to one side of the pitch. Mainu is stood there because to the left of him you can see Gravenberch. So he's overrun in midfield. He's not really sure which one to press. So
should Bruno be tighter? Like, I've just as a question, should Bruno be on McAllister to prevent this pass?
Yes, but in this scenario, I think he was marking Gravenberch.
Yeah, I think so as well. It kind of looks like it. Because you have three on the other side, right? You have Trent, Konate, and you only have Rashford between the two of them. So if he leaves Gravenberch, then you have 3 against 1 on the right side, basically.
Yeah. When Van Dijk had it, Casemiro was marshalling McAllister. He was the one who was behind McAllister. Not closely, but he was marshalling him. But then this is the problem that created the space that Liverpool found in United's midfield was the role of Szoboszlai. If you have a role in the team to roam around the pitch like prime De Bruyne used to, you can pick the ball up wherever you are and it'll drag players, which is exactly what happened. If you go to the next one, the problem gets worse when there were situations like here where the structure isn't awful here. It's not that bad.
You're pretty well marked, yeah.
It's Casemiro is marking Gravenberch in the middle. Mainu is marking McAllister in the middle. That's where they should be. Garnacho is about where he should be as well because he's closing off the passing lanes to McAllister. I think he should be tied.
And Robertson is all the way up, right? Or he's
But Mazraoui is marking him.
Yeah.
So the fullback has picked up Robertson. In my opinion, and United have done this better, Garnacho should be tucked inside a little bit more. He should be next to McAllister, closing off the passing lane. Xerxes is meant to be marking the centre backs, but Bruno is the one that's dropping in deep, and he's trying to close off the passing lanes. Look at the space from McAllister surrounded by 4 players. It's not that much, right?
No, it's pretty good.
Much. But what happens here is it's fizzed into McAllister. Mainu then goes down to close down McAllister. it's not quick enough. It's not intense enough. It's not intense enough from Garnacho. It's not intense enough from Bruno dropping deep a little bit more. McAllister bangs it through Mainu's legs, and hey presto, it's through to Szoboszlai. But
Can I ask you a question here on
yeah,
that point? You see Mazraoui obviously following the press up. I feel like, so just as an example, obviously it's against a totally different team, but against Fulham, for example, here, one of the things that we saw was Maguire would step all the way up to where, say, Szoboszlai is now and clear the ball when the pass was coming in and make a tackle or push the player off of it or jump. If it was in the air, he'd be heading it back away. Should the center, I mean, it's really high, obviously,
yes.
right? It's quite high here. If you have your center backs come up now, it's quite high because you're pretty much at the halfway at that point. But don't you kind of need that if you're sticking to the press to prevent these kind of gaps?
They can't do this in this situation because Liverpool play with a front three. Against
Right.
Fulham, it was just like the attackers would drop. Iwobi, I think it was Emil Smith Rowe, Munoz was like, I think
Yeah.
Munoz was like the only real centre forward that would really drop deep and marshal, and that's why they had to go touch tight to him. So Szoboszlai is one of the three midfielders here. You know what I mean? And
Yeah, I understand.
you can see the dilemma Mainu has here because he's 10 yards away from McAllister, but he's also pretty wary of the fact that the ball's going to be zipped into Szoboszlai. So this is where they found space. If you go to the next one, I think it'll be something similar. I think this is basically the same
It's similar
example.
situation.
It's very similar. The structure's fine here. Again, Gravenberg and McAllister are being marked by Fernandes and Casemiro, who's dropped deep. The press from Xerxes is not really it's not where he should be at all. He's not pressing the centre backs, so which means he's not putting Van Dijk under pressure, and nor is he in front of McAllister blocking off the pass to
Right.
McAllister from Van Dijk. If Xerxes moves 5 yards to the left there, Van Dijk probably doesn't play the pass to McAllister because Xerxes in the way. So it's not in this sense. It was both. The intensity was off, but you can see where Szoboszlai is now. In this sequence, McAllister receives again, turns, plays it through Casemiro's legs, and Szoboszlai is where he is. You can tell Mainu, look, can you go and track Szoboszlai with where he is? But then the left-hand side is completely open, right?
Yeah.
The left-hand side is completely open, and Van Dijk has the ability to chip it all the way over Rashford's head and play in Trent Alexander-Arnold.
Right, because you still have three forwards all the way up as well, right? So you keep pinning the center backs deeper and all of that. Yeah.
I didn't like the work out of possession from United's forwards. I think we've seen better games. I can point you to the cup final. I can point you to both Liverpool games last year. Sorry, not both. Not the one at Old Trafford. The one away. Remember the one away where it was like 0-0 and Liverpool were awful, but it was still 0-0 and there was tons of injuries. I mean, I don't like saying his name because I think everybody wants to shove it under the carpet and act like he never existed. But Anthony out of possession was good.
Of course he is.
Game.
Yeah.
But this just kept happening. It kept happening. If you want to go to the next slide, and when we can go through that as well.
Yeah. So this was the sequence right after the earlier image.
What happened right after? Now you can see the dilemma because Szoboszlai is in acres of space, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 players up. The 4-2 structure is up. It doesn't matter. It's been progressed through, and Liverpool were in. And this is
essentially if I count the numbers, every time they beat that press, they have a numbers advantage against us.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's
because we've got 6 up, so we only have 4 defenders back. They've progressed it with only 5 players. They literally have a 5 on 4 every time they get through that initial kind of block of the 4, the 2-4.
Now, and look at the gaps as well between the midfield and the forwards now. So it's why you keep seeing United players scampering back. You are meant, what this structure is supposed to do and what you are meant to do, as in what the best structures in football without the ball are meant to do. You're meant to squeeze the middle as much as you can. You're meant to compact it. You can't get through the middle. Go wide if you want. I don't care. Go to your winger.
Well,
and go see if you can get the ball in there. You are not meant to
well,
concede space here.
there was the game. It was City at home in Ten Hag's first season that we won, and he did this really interesting thing, which makes a lot of sense. Which was, I remember the game almost explicitly. He had Fred in there marking, I think, Kevin De Bruyne during the most of the game, but he did this interesting thing where he said, "I'll just let you move it with your fullbacks. You can go up the pitch with your fullbacks as much as you want. You can do that.
Yeah,
We're just going to let you." The fullbacks were unmarked the entire game. They were free just to move up the pitch.
yeah.
Now, when they went to do like those little underlaps, inverted runs, and all of that, they had it blocked off. They had 2 or 3 people in that line of defense, but the middle was like jam packed,
Compact. Yeah,
tight.
compact.
So City kept going up with the fullbacks, and there was nowhere to go, and
Yeah.
up with the fullbacks, and nowhere to go.
And then they'd
And
come back and have to recycle possession side to side because
yeah,
the point is you're not meant to concede space in the center of the pitch because
mhm,
then you got a free run to the edge of the penalty area. Then you're in trouble.
right, yeah, and I guess it creates a secondary problem too. I would ask you this in possession. I don't know if you have an image on this. You probably don't, but our wingers in all of these pictures, like if I look at it right, essentially they're quite wide.
Yeah,
I mean, I
they
know
have
they're tucking in
the
at
fullbacks.
times, but they're quite wide. And then, of course, in possession, they also tend to start really wide, right? And which for Garnacho and Rashford is probably their worst position in possession is when they're
Mm.
really wide rather than narrow. How do we? I mean, we can go through the rest of the pictures, but how on earth do we fix that? Because how do you solve this problem? Because it seems like out of possession, we're open in the middle, and then in possession, we're too wide. It seems like to some degree, it's the same problem.
Yeah,
Because of course the transitions can be quick in football from in and out of possession. And part of my concerns overall is that I feel like our out of possession structure means that in possession, when we win the ball back deeper, let's say Zoboslai misses this pass or something and Maguire intercepts it, our team is all the way up the pitch now. So we have to go long. And then the same thing when we're in possession, we go long. So we're stuck spread out and not very compact. I'm not sure if I've
Mm.
got this right, but it's something I keep seeing is that are like the transition between in possession and out of possession and out of possession and in possession just leaves us wide open all the time.
Yeah. It, it's like he's doing a mishmash of 3 or 4 or 5 different things.
Hmm.
And we haven't even got to why the goals were conceded. All
Right.
of this was happening, and the goals, it was still somehow 0-0 because they were making
Yep.
goal-saving tackles.
Right.
I think the goals come from pressing, from
Yeah.
Liverpool's pressing, but it's it the club has a big dilemma now because, like you said, there's problems out of possession that affect the in possession stuff, and there's
Yeah.
problems in possession that sort of jumble the out of possession stuff. It's a ripple
Yeah.
effect, right? Everything in
Yes.
football is a ripple effect.
Yeah.
Um, the, the goals were conceded as well because Liverpool's press started to. Now they weren't even really pressing the first 15 minutes. The first
Hmm.
instant where they did press, I have some images, but we don't. I've sent you I haven't sent you them, so people can view them in the thread.
Yep.
What was happening was Jota would press Martinez, and Salah would press Martinez from the other side as well. Gravenberg and McAllister would press Mino and Casemiro, which means that like the pass to Casemiro and Mino was shut off. So this was why in the first half there was 2 instances of Martinez passing to Mino, and Gravenberg swept it up because
Yeah.
Jota and Salah and Diaz started to press. So there was problems in that sense as well. Then you get onto the in possession stuff, and this is why I think that like people have said there's been some degree of people who have said, oh, we just didn't take our chances, this, that, the other. Listen, even if Xerxes scored twice, like Salah said, it could have been 4 or 5. They would have scored 4 or 5.
It was easy. Right. It would have covered the fact that we were still bad, right? Like that.
No.
It doesn't change the fact we were still bad if we took those chances.
Absolutely. Every decision, every pass was either too short or too full. The pass was either too quick or too slow. The decision making was terrible. Sometimes it was a cross when it should have been a cutback. Sometimes it was a pass when it should have been a shot. Sometimes it was a shot when it should have been a cross. Everything was bad in possession, because when the game gets as chaotic as it does in Man United Liverpool in these games, the advantage that United have had in the last few years is we've got really fast attacks, we've got transitions, we've got fast players on the counter attack, and we can hit you on the break. But even that wasn't working. So it was just incredibly difficult to handle, and it exposes a lot of problems. I think the underlying thing is Ten Hag has changed things this season, I made some points that even the improvements don't look that good, because they don't. I think even the changes haven't made things that good either. There's still problems with the changes.
Right.
So there's problems if you can see what happened last season, and then you went back and made changes, and then even those changes have still exposed us massively in the first 3 games, because they have. There's been problems against Fulham. There was problems against Brighton. Okay, fine, you were a little bit unlucky against Brighton, but then you were beating all ends up against Liverpool. It might be enough to beat Brighton, to meet your Fulhams and your Brightons, but it probably isn't
Southampton
enough.
after the break,
Of course, but it probably isn't enough to get a Champions League spot, because you're not playing City, Liverpool, and Arsenal anymore. You're playing City, Liverpool, Arsenal, Chelsea, Villa, Tottenham, Brighton,
West Ham,
West Ham to some degree. So, like, the Premier League is Newcastle. The Premier League is as difficult as it's ever been. So it's not. It's also just not good enough, because this is your year 3. This is year 3. This is season 3. In an elite club like Man United, you do not get this amount of time at another elite club. You just don't.
Yeah, and it seems like there's just everything we do. Like, you have this next image here up if you want to describe it. It seems like no matter what we do, every trap we lay, they're kind of ready for it, and they already have the answer.
Yeah, it did feel like that. This was just basically an example of, like, they started creating differing look at the minute clock, by the way. This is minute 9. This is just like the differing variations they had of getting the ball from defense to attack by dragging players in. So they drag players to one side, and then Luis Diaz, they did this very well under Klopp, by the way. Diaz, Salah, or Jota did this under Klopp. They would drop a striker back in, which means that, like, even the fullback, so Mazraoui had to follow him. The winger has followed him. Bruno's followed him. He's dragged 3 players in. He plays a lovely ball over the top of Mainu, I think, to Trent Alexander-Arnold, and then again Liverpool were in. So there was differing variations of how Liverpool found to get the ball from defense to attack, which is why you saw so much space in the middle. So the structure was exploited by either Szoboszlai roaming around, the low intensity, or through a forward dropping deep. There was a number of different ways Liverpool could progress the ball through the middle of the pitch, and that created huge issues.
Yeah, for sure. And it seems like there's just no answer, for United. And again, we like you see here, it's kind of the same setup. I mean, once again, I think a lot of people would note there's still a lot of space in between the midfielders and the back line in these images. I don't know if it's way too much space, but there certainly is a fair bit of space.
I disagree, because this image for me was me saying there's not that much space here. There isn't.
So then what goes wrong? What goes wrong?
That's a good question. This is what I highlighted in the before, in the 5th minute, where this was Van Dijk slicing it past, I think, 1, 2, 3. There's 4 players here. Again, the intensity isn't there.
We just don't get the ball. Like, it's set up, we just don't get it.
Gravenberch. But what happens is
this is where he gets turned, right? Where he gets it to Gravenberch, and he just turns and runs past Cobby. Fair enough.
This is
Okay.
the disallowed goal, but also Xerxes should be at least trying to stick a foot out on the right. He should be sticking his right foot out, or he should be anticipating the fact that Van Dijk is going to pass it to Gravenberch. There's three players in like the eye line of what Van Dijk is trying to do there, and he
Yeah, they don't get it.
calmly just slices it through. It's a good take by Gravenberch. Don't get me wrong; it's a brilliant take
Yeah,
to let the
and a
ball
good
run.
pass, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, let the ball run through him, take it on his right foot, and then go forward. But I've seen better work from United's forwards out of possession under Ten Hag.
Yeah, let me ask you a question about this then, because this is something where I think we get targeted a bit, and I'm never sure what the right answer is here on this, because I can't tell if it's individual, instructional, if it's correct, if it's not correct. You can see in this kind of setup, obviously, Robertson comes back quite far, and so Garnacho comes up pretty high. Now, if once Gravenberch turns, if I recall, it goes to the left first. So, of course, Garnacho's up marking his fullback. He's not back deep defending to help on an overload. But on the other side, Trent is very far forward. And Rashford, it doesn't stick tight to him. Now, the question is, do you want him to do that? Because we've seen kind of in the past, it's sort of a debate about this, and I don't know what the right answer is. And maybe there is no right answer. It's just whatever the manager's instructing. Do you want your winger to constantly be having to walk back into the back line? Because if he's following Trent all game, Rashford's essentially going to be a left wing back, in terms of position. Do you want him doing that in a structure like this? Or is he fine where he is? Because really there's no angle to Trent if the passes are blocked off appropriately.
I mean, I'll point it back to the Arsenal game away last season, where I think that was one of Rashford's best games without the ball. Rashford and Anthony, I think, because he was aware of how good Martinelli and Saka were at that point, he was like, I think he told them, look, you need to go back with them each time and double up on them, stop them from getting crosses in. So right. If your fullback, if that gets played to Trent there, I'm saying to Rashford, look, get back, because you've done it before. What I would say is another problem with this image, and I've highlighted it multiple times already on this podcast. Look at where Szoboszlai is. If Gravenberch gets the ball there, and he does, and he turns, De Ligt only now is thinking, okay, you can see where he is. He's playing, I think, Jota offside. He's kind of mindful of the fact that Szoboszlai is free, absolutely free. And it's because Casemiro and Mainu have been instructed to push up on the two midfielders.
Yes. Yeah.
I think what happens is it goes to the left, crosses in, and then there's a big problem. But we know why that occurs. It's just they're too easy to play through the middle. And whenever a team comes up with something different to what Ten Hag has come up with, it doesn't feel like he has a counterpoint. It feels like Ten Hag has a plan A, and then the team comes with, well, we got plan B, and it shits all over your plan A. And Ten Hag just kind of sits there and goes, nothing else. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, we've seen it, right? We saw like Brighton in a couple of times made in games against us, made adjustments after 20, 25 minutes. And what was a good performance went to shit. And then it didn't change. Yeah. We saw like against Brentford, Thomas Frank did the same thing. There was like 15, 20 minutes, I think. And then absolutely battered us after that with a few little adjustments to the plan. We've seen it a lot, I think, where United have had a bright 15 or 20 minutes where they're in the game, and then the other team makes an adjustment and it all falls apart and it goes just absolutely horrendous. And then it's never recovered. One of the things that's obviously you've highlighted a lot here, and I think this is maybe the biggest question of them all when it comes to United's midfield in general. Like if I go through every one of these images, what Liverpool are doing, 3-man midfield, right? In essence, they're using all three midfielders properly in the build-up to manipulate United quite strongly, right? In different ways. They're using the three. I mean, they're using them really, really well, right? These three in different ways. And Szoboszlai is often the most forward in these images. But again, here you have them going three, and then you even have a striker drop in, so then you have an extra man, and once again, you have a 3 and one of them's free. It never happens with United. It never happens with United in possession. This manipulation of the opposition by the midfield. we've obviously we focused on it on the other end, but it almost points out, I think, exactly what United don't do in possession, because they're so disconnected. When Casemiro's losing the ball in those situations, poor passes, of course, he doesn't have it. It doesn't look like this. It's like miles between him and the next player. And when Kobe loses that ball on the third goal, he receives it, and then there's 4 Liverpool players around him, and there's nowhere to go. And he has to hesitate. He hesitates on it, right? And it seems like the only place for us to go when our midfielders get the ball is either really long or backwards, and they usually go long, right? They usually just pump it forward, and then it doesn't work most of the time, right? They could go backwards and we could retain possession, but then it goes to Onana and we go long with Onana, right? And which, by the way, hasn't been that bad. His long passing against Brighton was actually pretty good. So we were going back to him and then long more, and it was working a little bit better. But that's where I'm like, I look at it and I'm like, even in this image, it's sort of funny. Again, Bruno is a forward. He's all the way up here, right? And these two are tight. And I guess I get it's frustratingly confusing, because with the midfielders that we have, should we not be able to manipulate teams the same way that is done to us, if not more? I mean, it's not like we don't have. It's not like Bruno isn't an energetic player. It's not like he's unintelligent in possession and his ability to move around. It's not like Casemiro didn't play in one of the best midfields of all time, in terms of moving teams around, manipulating them, progressing through the middle of the pitch. And Kobe Mainu has, when Kobe Mainu first broke into the team, his press resistance, his ability to get on the ball, to move around, to do all of that was absolutely top. Yeah. Now I feel like when he gets the ball, he's in a similar position to Casemiro. He's sitting there thinking, I got to launch it. I got to launch it somewhere because that's my only option. It's so frustrating. It bothers me so much, because I feel like it all still stems from the midfield. Liverpool spending the whole game progressing through the midfield is crazy when you look at it. It's like the one thing they shouldn't do. They were not, as you said, they were not just running down the wings in open space. They were going right through the heart of United the whole game. And that's why Salah says it's so easy, because he's just sitting there on the wings waiting for the ball. They're cutting it through. He gets it. He's in on goal. He doesn't have to run. He doesn't have to progress. He doesn't have to do anything. I mean, the guy probably walked half the game, because they could just right through to him and he could just sit on Dallo the whole game.
Yeah. There was improvement in possession against Brighton, and Fulham to a degree. Not improvements in a sense that they were finding space willy-nilly. Just the fact that they were being more calmer with the ball and shuffling it side to side, and then waiting for the space. Most of the spaces in possession from United have been wide. It's just they don't attack it enough. But it's been better in possession, I would say, against Fulham and against Brighton. Against Brighton especially, I was like, this is good build-up. This is the first time I've seen him progress the ball from A to B. I think we went through this in one video. I'm just this game just exposes Ten Hag very early, very, very early. So I'm curious to see what happens next and where we go from here.
Yeah. The last question I want to ask you about it, just from an in possession thing, because sometimes I wonder, am I crazy? Am I too biased? Because one, I have a big, I've said this before. I always will heavily support Marcus Rashford as a footballer for United.
Yeah,
I just will. It's just going to be what it is. It's a player I'm not going to turn on. At the same time, I want to know, am I crazy when I look at the game that was played and think he actually had a pretty good game in possession? When we played, when you were talking about those balls and behind, I looked at something yesterday and I thought, okay, that was kind of plan A when you look at the pass maps and stuff like that. Marcus Rashford running into spaces was kind of plan A in attack. And there was a number of occasions where the ball was pumped up there and just the bad pass. Too short, too long, like you said, overcooked, undercooked, timing off, all of that. 5-6 occasions where he's running into space or one-on-one over there and the ball just doesn't reach him. Then in the second half, later on, he gets the ball, and instead of attacking it, and I personally did not think the conditions were ideal for him to attack 1-on-3, 1-on-4, 1-on-5. He slows the play down. This was in the second half especially, recycles the ball around a bit, and it ends up with a couple of crosses into the box to Xerxes that created chances.
Yeah.
I feel like we're a better team. I know that we've played this way historically for quite a many years now, and it's hard to get past. And I understand when you're 3-0 down, the tendency from everybody, the crowd, to just go for it. Please go try and score a goal. But it seems like when we actually do calm down, move the ball around a little bit, the talent in the team starts to show through a bit more. The movement of the players, when you get numbers forward, and then better chances are created rather than just the one-off chances on the break. I mean, is that correct? Should he have been just going for it at the end of, in those instances, or is it better that we're slowing the game down, and should we be doing that more often rather than looking for those balls behind? I mean, I guess that's just a decision, but what do you think is at this point, like?
I guess the opposition dictates the way you play. And maybe against Liverpool, I felt like they were rushing the in behind because that's where we get a lot of goals from, or have done in the past, especially under Ten Hag. Use transitions a lot in 22-23. So I felt like against Liverpool, they did that a lot. Where, I mean, I guess that's why we also conceded the first goal, because Casemiro was rushing the pass straight away.
Yes.
But even, I think I remember in the first half, Rashford tried to play Garnacho in behind straight away. I get it, because that's how you've scored goals against Liverpool before. That's how you beat them 2 seasons ago. And
can we ever I guess I'm just asking, like, can we ever actually progress if that is so much of our plan?
Into a team that controls games?
Yeah.
Possibly. I thought we were. I thought the build-up against Brighton was alluding to that, right?
Yeah.
The build-up against Brighton was drag a fullback close, play it to whichever wing, play it to a left back or right back, so play it to Mazraoui or Dalot. Mount or Bruno drop deeper, so it drags a fullback in. And as you do that, a midfielder comes next to you, you play it to the midfield and you switch it. That's what they did.
Yeah.
That's what they did. I think they felt that against Liverpool, they're susceptible to more transitions. They're susceptible to more played in behind quickly. That might have contributed to the fact that the in possession stuff just sucked and it stank.
Yeah.
Wrong decision, bad pass. And that's going to be a problem when you are getting exploited on the other end, in the other half.
For sure. And I guess the question is, like, I still am not sure United know what they want to be in possession as well, because I do feel it changes very often.
I think that might be on purpose, though. I look back to what he did in the first season and why he was successful, and it was because, like, people are saying now, they don't know what they are. In the first season, they were saying that's a strength. In the first season, they were saying they're very multifunctional. They can dial into 3 different versions of themselves. They can have the ball in possession against the teams in the bottom half, and they can hit teams on the break who are better than them. Or Rashford was so good, even when games are like, it's the winter, they're creating nothing, nothing's happening, they'll find a goal. You know, those grindy results. So they were like, so at that point, they were saying it's a strength. It's not a strength if you don't do any of those things in a spectacular manner.
Right.
So going forward, whichever way it needs to be, Ten Hag just needs to win. But I think that can also be a hindrance to the way they play sometimes, because it never feels like United are ever in control. It feels like they just about win games or come close to winning them, or they get battered.
Well, and
you can't do
that's
that.
the reason I ask is like when I look at last season, we had a lot of that. Even though we didn't win that many games, there was a lot of games, especially in the November, December period, where we won like, Brentford 2 goals in stoppage time, right? Like
1-0.
these really squeaky things that it's like that's not progress. Even if you win those points, you win, you lose.
Yeah.
It doesn't actually change anything about United at this point. And I think where I'm trying to figure it out is like our goal cannot just be pick up the 3 points at this point. We're not there yet, like we're not there as a team where it's like just get the 3 points however you can.
Yeah.
I look at Liverpool, for example, and I think that they're a team that's pretty flexible in some ways. But if you watch them, my perspective or my assessment of what they do is they're pretty damn sure of themselves. They press really hard, and when they win the ball in your half, they're at you in a heartbeat. When they win the ball in the press, they will get you fast. They will get you instantly. But they'll play it slow otherwise. They're fine with playing it slow otherwise, with building it up, with shuffling it back and forth, with moving you around. And then once they're in, they're capable of moving quite quickly. But there's like the decision is there as everybody knows when you're going fast, when you're not going fast. And it's like they don't go from every goal kick straight for the net. They're not going from every time they win the ball straight in, on goal. They definitely know like, okay, this is when we're going fast. This is when we're going slow. And it's really clear. And that's when I say, I don't know that I feel like United don't know what they are. I'm not sure if they know that part of it, right? Because you can be a team that goes slow and a team that goes fast. You can be a team that can move it, that can pass it around, and a team that can transition quickly. But of course, I think you need a really, really tight certainty on when you're doing each and which is the appropriate time. And some of that is the decisions on the pitch. And some of that is like, I mean, it's the same thing with pressing, right? Like there's the triggers to know when are we pressing, when are we dropping off, when are we moving,
when to stay, when to go.
But surely you have the same triggers in possession. This is when it's a good time to go quick. This is when it's a good time to slow the play down. And that's the part that I feel we don't know yet, that we really don't know. Like when do you send the fullbacks into attack, for example? Like the first 2 minutes, I think against Liverpool, Dalot overlapped twice, got in there, overlapped. Yeah. We were going for it. We picked up corners 0 times the rest of the game. And I'm like, I don't understand that. How is that? How can you do that? And then you just don't. It just doesn't happen again the whole game.
I think that's when the game became sort of more transitional. Not more transitional, but that's when the game was like Liverpool attack, Liverpool progress through us. They mess up a cross or Martinez blocks it. Okay, we quickly got to attack because they've got 4 or 5 players up. It's a rush of blood. It's but nothing came off. It just didn't help that the in possession stuff was so horrible. Honestly, if somebody's got time, go back and watch it. It was just very horrible in possession. If you're getting progressed through one end and you're really bad at the other end where you can't create a chance properly, then you're going to suffer. He's got 2 weeks to assess this and maybe change the structure again because he's running out of time. It feels like he's been running out of time for ages now.
Well, that's the thing, right? We've seen this for so long that that's why I feel like at some point I can't sit there and just say it's just poor execution, right? Because it's like we're constantly in a position where it has to be inch perfect to work. And I don't think you ever will be inch perfect all the time.
But
even
if the execution is poor, which I thought it was out of possession from some of United's forwards, even when they were in the right place, even if the execution is poor, you don't have the leeway to fall back on that anymore. You just don't.
Correct.
Because we have too much evidence, we have too much data of this being poor. It's a very precarious position to be in now because we've had this manager for a long time and we've done this for a long time. There's not that many things that are going to be tolerated anymore. There's not, because people are fed up.
Yeah, agreed. Well, all right then. I think that about covers it. I think we're all pretty fed up. So we're gonna have to see if this changes. If we come back, if it changes, there's a couple of games, Southampton, Barnsley, that should be winnable games. But I think even in those games, we need to see control. We need to see, we need a dominant performance to change hearts and minds, not scrapey wins, not skin of the teeth, not, last gasp type of victories against these types of teams. Because following that, there's going to be Tottenham at home, there's going to be Porto away, there's going to be Villa away. 3 really tough games before the next international break that I think could easily be the make or break on the season for the manager at this point in time. So I guess we'll find out soon if any of this improves, and of course we'll be back after that, after the next games. Doing these weekly, maybe with 2 games to cover, depending on the timing of the games, to look at how they went, what we did, and see where we go from there. So, well, it was good to speak with you again and go over all of this, Dharnish, and hopefully we can talk some positives and some things that are working at some point soon, because it's not the most fun to constantly be pointing out everything that's wrong and continues to go wrong, and somehow it's something new every week. But it is what it is. Or worse, that it's the same thing every week. Yeah.
At least we're pointing stuff out. So it's always a pleasure.
Exactly.
Thank you for having me on.
Of course. All right. Thank you all for watching. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe. Go follow Dharnish Iqbal on Twitter. Read through his thread, all of that. Lots more images, pictures, things like that to explain all of this. And we will see you all in the next one.